All right, I guess we can get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathaniel, and thank you for coming to our first webinar, which is creating your first digital space in Blender. Try that again. Hello, everyone. Where's the recording started? Okay, we're recording. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our first webinar series, Creating Your First Digital Space in Blender. My name is Nathaniel. I'm the founder of Digital Spaces, and I'm super excited to have you all here so I can show you. Little introduction, really before we get started, I guess. Feel free to follow along on your own in Blender. The first half of this talk will be me really going through what a digital space is and really how it's made from a high level. And then we will run into a live demo. So feel free to follow along on that. It's going to be very simple, straightforward. I'm actually not a Blender pro myself, so it's going to be a very simple model. Feel free to stop me at any time to ask questions. We should have the chat open. And also feel free to raise your hand and I should be able to see your question right here. And this really goes even beyond this call. I am extremely open to any user to contact me at any time. I love hearing from everyone. And I love hearing like if you have a bug or if you have a comment or a concern or really anything that ever comes up, you can chat me live in the app in the bottom right-hand corner. And you'll have my email, my personal email at the end of this call too. I'll email you. And any other way to get in contact with me. You can also email our support at digitalspaces.io. That goes to me. So feel free always to reach out, let me know what's going on, and I'd be happy to help. Then a recording of this webinar will be available within 24 hours. It's probably going to be faster than that, but I'll have this uploaded to YouTube, and then I'll also send out anybody that registered will get the recording link as well to their email. And I guess we can get started then. So a little bit about myself. I'm trained as an architect. Uh, Passion still lies in architecture. And I went to University of Illinois for architecture and graduated in 2015 and immediately jumped right into the visualization industry. It was really my passion during architecture school, really, as soon as I found out what ArchViz was, and that it could be a career, that is exactly where my mind was focused, and I've been in it ever since. I started Digital Spaces in 2018. So I worked in Los Angeles as an artist for a few years and then ended off going on my own in 2018. Started Digital Spaces as a company, but doing a lot of like freelance work, working with a few other artists. And at the time, I was just making these experiences myself, coding them myself and delivering them without a platform, just on the web with some of the limited web knowledge I had at the time. And then around 2020, when the pandemic happened, a lot of my 3D work actually disappeared. And I kind of made the decision to shy away from 3D work, kind of get out of that and focus more on turning what we were working on internally, which was in order to make these virtual tours or digital spaces, turn that into a full web platform that could be used by anyone. And at first, we made that just for 3ds Max. So in 2022, we released our beta for 3ds Max, and the number one feedback that we got on that was everyone was asking, when is this coming for Blender or SketchUp or Revit or Rhino or Maya and Cinema 4D and all these applications. And so kind of had to make the decision early, since we were just in a beta for 3ds Max, of do we just keep building for 3ds Max until it's perfect, or do we take a step backwards, rebuild the foundation, and bring everyone along with us on this journey? And that's the option that we chose. We decided to kind of stall that beta, take a step back, rebuild everything for Blender, SketchUp, Rhino, Revit, 3ds Max. And with that foundation, relaunch with everybody with us. And we really started rolling that out in the last 3 months of last year. really finalizing that beta. And so now moving into 2024, we've got the full release that can work with all these applications. And Blender is one of them. So here we go. Enough about that. So digital space is a spatial experience that's built for the web, and it can be viewed on any device. And a digital space is always going to be viewed through the your web browser. We don't have like an iPhone application on the App Store that you can download and view a digital space. It's only going to be available on the browser. And the reason for that is really just for your clients. So when you send them a digital space, they don't need to go download a whole new app to run this. And another thing is we don't use any headsets. And because that's probably our other biggest question people ask is, can I do this in VR? And at the moment, no. And that was actually a conscious decision. We know that we made the decision not to use headsets. And the reason for that is really similar to the reason why we don't have an application, like a phone application, is because of accessibility. We want to make it a frictionless experience for your clients when they get a link to be able to view it. And so because not a lot of people want to download an app, we just use the web browser. And then because nobody really has a VR headset, we don't use VR headsets. If VR wants to become more mainstream, totally we can turn it on and include it. But at the moment, we just make things easier. No headsets, no app, just through your browser, but still viewed on any device. So that brings us into the how it works. So a digital space is the combination of multiple 360-degree pano images and your 3D model. And here we say we can export from applications that support the model types USD, BAE, and FBX. But we would also need to use a render engine that supports 360 rendering. And if you don't know 360 rendering or are a little confused already, hopefully here we can go through everything for you. So to break it down, there's four main steps to creating a digital space. Step one is you have to set the views in your model. And so what that means for Blender is you would need to set your cameras in Blender inside your model. Step two is you're going to render the 360-degree pano images. I'll show you how to do that here soon, but really you're just going to be rendering those as a JPEG or a PNG. Really similar to how you would render a still image, we're just going to use a 360 camera and render them as 360 images. Step three would be to export your 3D model. And so for that, it's just in Blender as easy as file export. Then step four is you're going to bring both your Pano images and your 3D model to digitalspaces.io, where you would upload, and we would auto build your experience for you to share it. And so behind the scenes, what's really going on here? Why do we need the panos? Why do we need the model? So when you're standing inside of a digital space, you are standing inside of the 3D model, but your camera location is exactly your camera location from your 3D model in 3D space. And we're projecting as one texture that 360 image onto your model. That's kind of seen in the second image here. If this sphere is your camera, we're taking the 360 image and we're just projecting it all around in every direction onto that model. But a digital space is viewed in the browser and viewed online. And so your 3D model in Blender might be gigabytes in size. It might have hundreds of millions of polygons, pieces of geometry to it. So if we were to send that straight to the web, that would crash any device immediately. Browsers cannot support that, especially somebody's like mobile device that might be a few years old. And so when you upload your model to digital spaces, we optimize it down to 5 MB or 100,000 triangles. So no matter what size your model is coming in from Blender, we are going to run it through an optimization step to give you a really lightweight model. And then from there, we project your 360 images onto the model. And then when you move around from location to location inside of a digital space, we're just reprojecting the next 360 image as a texture. And this actually might help if I have a digital space here for us. So that way I can describe it together. Okay, so standing here, what we're viewing is a 360 image. But you can see my cursor is in 3D space. That is because this is touching the lightweight 3D model that's behind there. And if I hit this button in the bottom right-hand corner, this box, this will bring us to our dollhouse mode. And here you can actually see that we can see the projection of the 360 image onto the model. And you can see what happens in the background here, how that projection, it's coming from the camera and it's like splattering outwards. But you can see how when it goes beyond geometry, it's still splattering in every direction. And then when we move to another location, if I click here, we're still moving inside the 3D model. There we go. We're moving inside the model, but all we're doing is we're changing pano image that's used as a texture for that projection. And then when we're regular walking, you can see here we're just moving through the model, changing the pano image. So a digital space is comprised of 360-degree pano images in your 3D model. And then we do optimize your model on digital spaces. So step one, set views in your model. And so you as the artist are really in control of where the views are placed. We do recommend this common height, which is about where somebody that would be doing interior photography might place their camera on a tripod. It's not exactly eye level. Uh, Average human eye level is a bit taller than this. It's about like 60 inches or 160 centimeters or so. But we do recommend lowering the camera a bit to this height at camera. We just find that to be just a better visual experience walking through interiors. And then we show a few other camera heights you can place at as well for fun. Like if you want to see it from a dog's perspective, or if somebody is sitting down, if you want to place a camera in a chair or so. And when you're placing views in your 3D model, it is best to have all of the views, say, connected. They should all see one another. And an example of what not to do is say you place a camera in a bedroom, and then you have one other camera in another bedroom that's separated by walls. That would be a bad experience for the user because what they want to do is be able to actually click around and move. But if the next location is in a whole different room, they're really not going to be able to move there. And so it's best to always have multiple exits for your users and have all the viewpoints be connected. The next would be if you have doors in your project, it's best to open the doors. That way, again, users can see through the door and know to click through and to enter through there, where a closed door might really simplify that the experience ends or you cannot walk through there. And then the same thing with stairs. If you do have stairs in your experience, it's best to always place a camera at either the starting and the ending position of stairs so users can easily click through and have a clear path. And then lastly, when you're replacing your views, make sure open your doors and then feel free to get creative. Place views in all sorts of funky positions. And as I mentioned earlier, with like having a dog or if your user is sitting, or it really depends on the project, but feel free to really be creative because you could place your views really anywhere you like. You are in control of that. Second step would be to render the images. So these need to be rendered as what are called equirectangular maps, or 360 images is the common name. We accept JPEGs and PNGs. We do also accept this XML image type, but that's for the render engine Enscape. So I don't think that has anything to do with Blender users. We give some resolutions here that are um, maybe like, don't treat these too exact. You can really render at any resolution you like to, as long as your image is a 2:1 aspect ratio. And that is how 360 images work. It's 2 at the bottom, 1 on the side. These resolutions are just common or helpful kind of jumping off points, say, but there really is no limit to your resolution to upload. But some users kind of ask me, that's okay, do we exactly have to render it 4096 by 2048? It's like, no, you can render it whatever you like, but these are just really helpful tools. And one thing to really keep in mind when you're rendering your images is that your image names should be similar to your view names. And I'll explain that a little bit more once we really start hopping into Blender, but I'm just going to mention it now. try to name your images. So if this is named like camera2.jpg, your camera in Blender should also be named camera2. Last step is to export your model. So again, when you do upload it, we are going to optimize it to 100,000 triangles. And the first thing to keep in mind is the model is really useful just around the user, because when when you're moving from location to location, we're really moving through the model. So in this case, we have modeled outside all of these buildings and all of the site context and all these palm trees and all, but this actual experience just happens in the lobby and users can never walk outside. And so there really is no reason for us to export all of the exterior of this model if the user is only going to be interacting in this room here. And so one tip when you're exporting your model is turn off all your site models. So if you have like, walls and glass windows separating the user from these outside elements, and they're never going to explore those, do not export that part of your model. You can turn that off. Because we only have 100,000 triangles for the whole experience. So if you have a ton of vegetation and a ton of external site models, we don't want those to be used part of your 100,000 triangles. We would rather really make sure that it's just the model or just the area that the user is going to interact with. So for that, this is kind of the same thing. Just like make sure you isolate your buildings and then feel free to export multiple models for split levels or larger projects. And I'll show you that a little bit later too, how we work with what are called scenes, how you can upload multiple models for one project, but you can also just keep that in mind. You can export parts of your model. Lastly, and I don't know if this is huge for Blender. I'm really not familiar with Blender, but if there is a way to proxy items, please do that. And feel free to do that. I know this, for instance, is mostly for 3ds Max, but if there's a lot of vegetation, and you can turn it to a box or simplify that geometry in any way, totally do that. Because what we're really looking for in that 3D model that you upload is something lightweight that's just going to operate in the background, because really you're viewing the 360 panos. And so feel free to really try to simplify your model if you can through proxies. And then lastly, when you export your model, make sure that you have your cameras and your geometry on or being exported, because we read your camera locations from Blender into making a digital space. That's how we automatically create those hotspot locations with no code. So we read it from your camera. So be sure you have those on when you export, and then also make sure you have your ceilings on. I've made that mistake way too many times. And then the last step is to bring it to digital spaces, which I don't have on here. But those are the three main steps of what you would do, say, in Blender, would be place the views, render the images, export the model. And then lastly, I will show you after our Blender demo to upload to digital spaces. So I guess this is a good time for me to kind of pause and see if anybody has any questions. No? Okay. Well, no questions right now. Okay, very cool. And this is actually my first webinar presentation, so that's good to hear. But if anybody has any questions, even after this, or if you're watching the recording, feel free to reach out and ask. Okay, well, now I'm going to enter really the Blender specific part of this presentation. And I'm going to be doing this just from a new Blender file. I'll even show you that. We'll just open Blender together. So if you do want to follow along, feel free. We're just going to open up Blender, get started. Okay. So now we know that step one is to set views in our model. And I guess in our case, we need to make a model first. So let me I'm just going to take the box that they give us and I'm going to turn it into a floor. And I'm going to move it down. Okay, great. Just so the top of this box kind of becomes the floor. And then I'm going to add a mesh, which is a cube. And I'll just kind of move it to this corner, maybe scale it up a bit. Cool. And then I'm going to add a cylinder. We can make that bigger too. And I'll just kind of add it over here. And maybe one more shape. And I know this is a very simple model. Bear with me. Okay, we can just have that one floating. Sweet. What a fun scene. And I'm just going to use the light that Blender kind of gives us in here. That will be okay. So there's our model. Step one, set views in the model. Blender kind of gives us a camera here to start with. So I'm just going to use that. But one thing to keep in mind with the cameras is this camera is actually looking down. We do recommend that your cameras face forward. And so I'm actually going to get rid of this X rotation. And I'm going to go with 90. So this camera is facing straight. And I could also get rid of the Z rotation, but that doesn't really matter. Your camera can be rotated on the Z axis really at any angle. The main one is just going to be in Blender, your X is going to need to be 90, so it's looking out, and then same thing with your Y, so it's not rotated at all. Because if I was to move this, you could see this camera really gets rotated. That's going to be kind of funky. So that goes to 0. X rotation at 90. Great. And so then the camera height, so if we go to place views, if you remember here, we give this 55 inches, 4.5 feet, or 140 centimeters is what we recommend your camera height. So in Blender, I guess I placed this box really at 0, the top of that box. So that means my Z height in the camera needs to be 140 centimeters. Great. Well, that just shows how big of a scene I just made here. So maybe let's take this and kind of scale it all down a bit. We don't need a box that big. Cool. So there's our first camera. And the next thing, which actually I need to put this in the documentation, be a little bit better at this, is the camera name should start with DS. And that way, when you upload to Digital Spaces and we're reading your file, we can make sure we grab your cameras. That's just because FBX files and Collada files, depending on what camera you're using, what plugins you're using, sometimes cannot read them. So just adding a DS as a prefix really helps us then when you're bringing this to digitalspaces.io that we can read your camera. So our camera is placed at 1.4 meters on Z. It's facing straight and it's named DS underscore. And so now we need to place a camera location really everywhere we want the user to walk. And so I'm just going to do a Control CV and we can just start moving some cameras around. And another one. And just for this demo, maybe I'll just do 4 of them. Great. Looks good to me. So these are going to be the 4 positions that the user can walk to. They're all labeled DS camera. They're at the good height. Okay, so then the next step is going to be to render. And we want to render these as these 360 images, these equirectangular maps, and a 2:1 aspect ratio. And then we're going to name them similar to our view names. What I mean by that is if my view name here is DS camera 01, 02, 03, we're going to want to name our views like that. And maybe here I can call this DS camera 001. Oh, well, that renamed. Okay, great. I meant 000, but all good. Okay, and so from here, we're going to now switch to, under render properties, our render engine is going to move to cycles. Because Cycles, I believe, is the only engine that comes standard in Blender that can support 360 rendering. If you know of another engine in here that can do 360 rendering, let me know or try to use it because everything will, from here on, will be the same. Or if you use another plugin for a render engine that supports 360, great. You feel free to use it. So now from here, we're going to have to take our camera property and we're going to make this a panoramic camera. And we're going to change the panoramic type to equirectangular. Same as here, equirectangular. And actually, no, I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. I should be showing on our website, if you go under resources, website, just digitalspaces.io, resources documentation. This is really like the master help center where you'll find everything. For instance, in our knowledge base, you can find supported files, how 360 panos work, how to name your images, how to place the views in way more detail, all about uploading and what a version is and how to publish, how to embed. Like this will give you really everything. And then here, this would be per application. So you can follow along in Blender. Step one, set up your cameras, render, export. These will give you the step-by-step guide. And this is really the same steps that I'm going to be doing in this demo here. But if you need this later, and you can always find this also at help.digitalspaces.io, or again, you can find it on our main website, resources, documentation. All right, so back to here. We've changed our camera to panoramic equirectangular, which, I actually should have done that before I copied my cameras. So maybe we could just delete. We could delete these. We'll try this again. Let's name this one OO. Okay. Control CV, Control CV, Control CV. Okay, cool. So we have new locations. And this time the cameras are all set to panoramic equirectangular. Perfect. All right, so our cameras have been set up. So step two, render the images. Then here we're just going to change our output to, I'm just going to do these at 2048 by 1024. These are going to be really small, but it's just a demo. It's all good. And we're going to export them as a PNG. That seems cool with me. Frame range, 1 frame. And I think we're just good to render from here. And again, I am not the best at render. So my rendering here might be pretty rough, but bear with me. I guess first I'm going to save this file. Blender, this will be our Blender demo. Right. So now to render, we are going to go to rendering. Maybe not. What is it, F12? Right. Okay, F12. Thank you. And if you know how to batch render in Blender, please do that. Um, I'm just going to be doing these one at a time with my limited Blender knowledge. But render how you normally do. The main thing is just we want to, at the end on here, we're going to call this DS camera O, because I want my image name to be similar to my camera name. Okay, and then can we render this one? What is this going to be? O1, F12. Great. Okay. And this will be O1. Sweet. Then we go to 2, F12. So right now we do only accept these equi-rectangular 360 image types. Some people that have done 360 images before also render cube maps. And, we could accept cube maps and turn that on if there's enough interest in that. I'm happy to. To be honest, we really only accept these equi-rectangulars because that is just what I was the most used to. Uh, and when I started my studio, that was just kind of what I chose that we render with. I kind of like it because you can see the whole image together. I know it's distorted at the poles, the top and bottom, but you can see the whole scene. Where cube maps sometimes it's like be a little confusing what I'm looking at. But if there's enough interest, we can introduce cube maps. But right now, it's just the equirectangulars. All right, so we have camera O, O1, O2, and O3 rendered. Awesome. And they're rendered with a 2:1 aspect ratio, equirectangular maps, and we named our images similar to our view names. So now the last step is we're going to export the model. And in Blender, that is maybe the simplest thing. We go to File, Export, and we're going to export as a collada, a .dae. And here we'll just call it Blender demo.dae, no problem. Export collada. Done. Done, done. Okay. So now we upload this to Digital Spaces. And so I'm going to start on my dashboard. And the dashboard is where all of your projects are stored. And so you can see all these projects here, just the projects I've done through my studio or for freelance work or so. And you can have access to them at any time. And what you can also do, you can see here on the reserve, there's 2 users. There's myself, and then there's also Porva. And Porva is actually the client. And so I deliver this project to my client through the platform here. And the reason why I do that is so then when Porva logs on, she'll be part of my organization and she'll also see this project in her account. So that way she's never like bothering me being like, hey, what's the link to that digital space? Or like, I lost it in my email or you sent me a text message or if years go by, they can always just go to digitalspaces.io and log in and they'll have access to it. And how that works is everyone on the platform has an organization. Mine just happens to also be called Digital Spaces, but you'll see I also have a default organization or one that's just my name. And so all your work that you upload does not get added to your user account. It actually gets added to your organization. And then users join organizations. And so again, when Porva logs in, she's invited to my organization, but she's only been invited to this project. So she can only see this project. And then she has been invited with edit controls. You see that here as a member. And that's just because I'm very close to her and sometimes she can make small changes if needed. But if you have other clients that have no idea what 3D rendering is or do not want them to even change the name of your project, you can invite them as a guest and then they're just view only. But to make a digital space, start here and we'll just call this the Blender demo. So we'll create. And then the first page this jumps us to when we create a new experience is our scenes page. And so here we just have an untitled scene and we have to upload the model and the panos. So easy. So let's go navigate to our model that we just made, Blender demo, and then we can upload the panos. There they are. And so here we read your model and now we have found some cameras. And you'll see that we're searching this prefix DS, and those are our DS cameras. And I was saying earlier, you should try to name with the prefix DS underscore. That's because that's the first thing that we search for is for anything with DS in there for your cameras. And the reason why that is sometimes collada files might not read all different camera types that are in Blender. And if you've ever experienced this, if you're like exporting from Blender, bringing it to another application and your cameras don't come in, because file takes just work like that, I guess. Uh, it could be the biggest headache that your cameras don't import. It's like you'd read them wrong, or when they export it, they don't export as a camera type. There's all sorts of reasons. So for us to stop that is we just try to do a prefix. So we're going to search your whole scene for anything with DS underscore, just assume it's a camera. And so here, these are all of our cameras. We named them with the DS, so we could just hit continue. And we are optimizing this model down to that 100,000 polygons, but in this case, there was really no optimization. But if I hit this info button, you'll see how many triangles and vertices are in the scene. Again, if you uploaded a very large model, it will be about 100,000 triangles here, right under it, 99,000 say. But you could find that here. So here it is though. There's our model. That looks good. That's where we place the cameras. So we're reading all of that. And then you can see here, we also placed on the ground, we found the ground location to place those rings, which you see like here, these rings that are placed on the ground. We're reading those from your camera location and automatically putting them in. All right, so the model's uploaded, panels were uploaded. The last step is we just now need to tell what camera goes to what pano. And this was the reason why we try to name our image names similar to our camera names, because at this step, we can now say, hey, this image 000 attaches to camera 000. And it'll be the same thing here. Camera or image 01 attaches to camera 01. So there we have it. And now we can just hop in and view. Sweet, we're inside. So again, what we're viewing here is the 360 image that we rendered. But then you can see we're inside the 3D model as well. We're just projecting that pano to the model. And when I click, we move around. Awesome. That easy. As long as your cameras are named properly and we read your file, everything should work without error and no coding required at all. And so now if you were to ever, because in 3D rendering, nobody gets it right the first try. Your client's going to want to change, you're going to want to change. And so say you went and you re-rendered more panos, you moved your model around, you rendered more panos, even if you moved your camera locations, you can just come back in here and under upload model, replace your model. And under the images, you can add more or you can replace all. But remember, if you were to add more images, you're going to have to re-export a model with your new camera. You know, if you're to add an extra camera and render that image, you will need to re-export a model, bring that in, you can add more images, or you can replace all the images. And so this is built so you can be constantly updating and updating on a project. And we'll just replace the model, replace the panos, and you'll be rocking and rolling. So you don't need to create a new project every time you kind of like redeliver to the client on anything. So one other thing that we can do is we can add what are called locations. And these are a good way for when somebody's inside the experience to be able to quick jump around. That can be seen here. As you can see, we're in the cafe. If I click, we can also move to like the entry and it's the cafe. So these are a way for users to just really quickly jump around to predetermined destinations. We call those locations. So here, I guess this location I can maybe call the box. We'll call this location, this is what the cone, floating cone, but I'll call it the cone. And then maybe this one is close to this cylinder. Cylinder. I can't spell well. Let's go with that. And then this one, maybe I just won't even have a location. And then what we could do too is choose our starting locations. Where's the experience start? And here, maybe I want to start it at the box. So now when we go to the View tab, we'll see that we did start here at this box location. And now we can quickly jump to like the cylinder or the cone. You know, if this was a larger project too, with different rooms, like the kitchen, the living room, or or really anything, you could just set them up down here as these locations. And then as the user also moves through, you see that the location will change. And so what you could do there is you can actually tag the same location, multiple panos. So for this one, maybe I'm also going to attach this one to the box. But you'll see here, this box is starred. And the star means that this is actually going to be the location. Because they're tagged the same one, the starred one is where you're going to start on. And then this one just also becomes the box. So now when I hop back to the View tab, I'm still starting at the box. But then when the user moves, you can still see that we're on box. So they still know that they're inside that location. And then when we move now into like the cylinder or the cone, those change. But this one is still the box. But when I go here and I actually say I'm going to go to the box, it brings us to that start location. So really the last step, if everything's looking good here, is we can publish. And so how a digital space works is everything is free to upload, then you have to upgrade to share. And so as you're building your experience and playing with it, everything is free on the platform. But then just when you want to publish this and have it go live, you will need to upgrade. And upgrades start at $24. And what you'll get with that is the 5,000 views, and you can upload up to 5 GB. And I think this is good for like 99% or so of users. Will be really good with 5 GB, 5,000 views. But then if you are just have a really big project or you just keep uploading and uploading because the client keeps making changes and you need more uploads, there's a 25 GB plan that also gives you 25,000 views. And then if you have a mega huge client or so, you can all go up all the way up to 125 gigs or 125,000 views. But in this particular case, I'm actually going to just on the back end upgrade this project so I can show you how to publish. Which is also another thing I want to mention too, is that everyone that is live on this call today, I'm going to send you an email afterwards, and everyone's going to get one free digital space. So you can upload, you can play, you're doing this demo. I'll give you one for free here. And so you won't need to pay to upgrade. I'll send you that email after this call. Okay, so on the back end, I just upgraded this one. So if I refresh, cool. So pretend like I just paid the $24. Great. And now we want to share this with our client, want to send it off to the internet. So really all we have to do here is the publish button. All right, great, that's done. And now there's a few options up here that we could do. The first button to share is if we wanted to share this with our client by their email. And the reason why you would do this is if you want to invite them to the platform. So this is what I mentioned earlier on the dashboard, where I do invite some of my clients so they have this project always in their account, kind of in their pocket at all times. And you can invite them as a guest or a member, type in their email here, invite them to this project. The other thing you could do is you can embed this onto your website. So by clicking this button, we give you this embed code that you can just copy, and you can just paste this onto your website. And that way, for instance, we have this running on our homepage. Like here's an example of one embedded onto our website. So here's the code we give you. You can just copy that. The third option here, this link, is just to really copy the link. So if I was to open this up in an incognito window and I was to go to this link, that goes right to the project. So this is what you could do to share in a text message or an email or a Slack message or really anything, just a common link. And then the last button here is just to open this up in a new tab for us, just to, if you want to view it. And then when you make a change, so say, all right, so this is published, our client has it, and then we come and we make a change. Say there was a change to the model, which maybe let's actually make one or so. Or maybe what we can do is uh, maybe we can add a new camera. So we added this view here. Sweet DSO4. So let's render it. Okie doke. So we're going to save this as O4. Sweet. And then here we're just going to have to re-export. So file export, Collada. You can just override that one, no big deal. So now here we're going to have to, when we upload the model, we'll replace it. Upload model. Here we are. So now we should see our new camera, that DSO4 in here as well. And there it is. Cool. Continue. Okie dokie. And then we just need to add more images and add our fourth. Okie doke. And then it does seem here that these got a little misaligned. So we just have to go to 0. This one's 1. This one is 2. That one's 3. And then this is 4. Okay, great. But our locations stay the same. Maybe I'll connect this one to the cone. Sweet. Let's go view it. Make sure everything's looking okay. Yep, here it is. It was that easy to now add a new location, re-export. And so now we'll notice that in our project in the editor, we can republish. So in here, we added this whole new camera. We have a whole new model, a new pano. But when we open this in a new tab, we'll see that this experience doesn't have that. It's still missing. That's because this is the published shared experience. And this might like be in the hands of your client. But in here, we're just in the editor. And so when you're like changing things around in the editor and making changes, nothing is being saved live on the published version. And so you can come in here, do whatever you want, all good. Once you're done with those changes, you can then republish. So this looks good. I mean, we had no errors. I like it. So we can hit the publish button. So when we hit that again, we'll just give it a second. And there we are. It's been successfully published. So now when I go back to this link and I refresh the page, here we are. There's our new camera. Now we're in here, editor. Great. Okay, well, oh, okay, maybe the last thing I could show is the, back to the dashboard, you can upload a cover image to your project. And so this would be, typically we would render like another still image of the project, but another thing that we can do is actually inside the digital space, we can open up the camera tool. And I like to just make covers from here. So I can just like snap a photo, hit the download button, and I'll just save this in here. So like our Blender test cover. And now back on the dashboard. We can cover image, and we can select our Blender test cover, upload, and there we go. So this is your cover image now on the platform, but then also when you send the link, and I'll show you here, if we copy this link, and then say we were to like send this in a, maybe a good example, Slack, but don't want to open that up. Let's see here. I'm going to open it. Okay. And then into my messages. So if I want to send this digital space link, you'll see it also sends with the cover image. And it says our project name in here too. So that's a good reason to have a cover. So then when you send this to your client, like in a text message or email or in a chat message or so, or even when you share this like on Facebook or Twitter or something, you would also get the nice cover image as well. But that really is, I think that sums up about how to make your first digital space in Blender, unless there's any additional questions or so now, or maybe if people feel more comfortable, maybe I can stop the recording and then we can do questions just kind of on the side if you don't want your question to be on this video for all time. Is that okay with everyone or? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording here then. And if you are um, viewing this at a later date on YouTube or so, please, please, please feel free to contact me. And my email I will bring up here is Nathaniel at digitalspaces.io. And again, in the bottom right-hand corner of the platform, there's the chat. This goes directly to me. Or if you want to contact us on the main page under contact, you can contact us through this form or at support at Digital Spaces. These really all go to one place, which is me. But again, here's my personal email if you have any other questions in the future or so. But for now, I'm going to jump to some questions in the chat with the people that are here live. So thank you.